Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today, we learn a shocking truth about fentanyl. Emergency room doctors told Juli, our guest, the tox screen on her son was negative for fentanyl. They were wrong. The next day, Juli lost her son. Juli Shamus joins us to tell us why Tyler's Law, when she gets the job done, will be a game changer in the reduction of deaths from fentanyl. Let's meet our guest, Juli. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for having me.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that brought you here today.
Okay, I'm going to start with telling you about my son, Tyler, the Tyler in Tyler's Law. And Tyler was extremely bright, very inquisitive, very creative. He was always building things around the house and we call it MacGyvering, like, inventing things. And when he turned about 13, he started having anxiety. So he decided to self-medicate and he started using cannabis, which I didn't think it was a big deal because I grew up in the 80s and it was just something we did and it didn't really have very many negative repercussions. I didn't realize that the marijuana of, that time compared to what is now is the marijuana now has so much more THC. I just had no clue. I was just really uninformed. And that really actually makes me angry that knowledge is not out there. That information is not out there for parents. And even for kids, I just wonder if he would have made the same choices had he known the effects. So he started smoking it and it helped him with social anxiety. And he told me, Mom, when I smoke it, I feel like I fit in. No one notices I'm different. And okay, but eventually it stopped working, as it does with the dopamine and stuff. You need more and more. So he turned to promethazine codeine cough medicine to emulate rappers, like with the big styrofoam cups walking around. And at that time, I didn't realize it was an opioid, but we knew that he was having some issues. So by this time, he's about 15 or 16, and we had him taken from his bed at 4:30 in the morning to go to a wilderness program in Idaho, where he was for 3 months, and then he went to a therapeutic boarding school. And he did really well at the wilderness. I think he really liked it because he could find arrowheads and bullet casings, and he made things. He made a bow and arrow there, and he just could, he was in nature and he could be creative and everything. And he didn't have to do schoolwork, which was not his forte. He didn't like to learn about things that were not of interest to him. But if it was of interest to him, he knew everything about it. And so after the boarding school, we brought him home and he went to a sober living, was doing well, got a job, and everything seemed okay. Everything seemed great until two girls that he liked introduced him to smoking heroin. And he came to me to tell me, and I just about died because in my mind, heroin was not something that kids his age did or middle-class kids did. It was something that in my day was, the guy on the corner with the needle in his arm. I didn't even know you could smoke it. So he came to me and he told me that he was going to get off of it. He went to some other treatment places and stuff and came back, got another job. We thought everything was great until he had brokered himself to the last treatment place he was in, which means his friend referred him. The friend got money, and being a very nice friend, the friend split it with him. Well, what does a kid that has no impulse control and, the frontal lobe isn't developed do when they get money? So he went to the original girl who had introduced him to smoking and said, I want to get some heroin. And they got stuff, and he was living in a sober living at the time. And so I got a phone call in the middle of the night saying, something happened. We think Tyler overdosed. He's on his way to the hospital. He's fine. I spent the night fuming, just thinking like, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our family has gone through so much these past years, and he doesn't want to get sober. I'm done with him. He can go live on the streets. I'm going to do tough love. Well, that morning he calls me and he tells me that he's like, Mom, did you hear what happened? Yes. And I'm not happy. And he says, no, I didn't take anything. I'm like, Tyler, come on. I don't believe you. And if anyone knows anything about people that have addiction issues, they don't always tell the truth, nor do teenagers that don't have addiction issues. So I said, I don't believe you. He's like, no, come talk to the doctor. So the emergency room is right around the corner from my house. So I went over there to talk to the doctor. And Tyler's story was that he took too much Imodium, that he had an upset stomach and he had started a new job and he took too much Imodium. So I asked the doctor, can that happen? And the doctor said, yeah. And we did the tox screen and it turned out negative for everything. I'm like, are you sure? Yes. I asked him 3 times, did you test him for fentanyl? Now, this was in 2018. So, fentanyl wasn't all over the news then or anything. And I had only heard of it because Tyler had told me that a few sober livings before that some of the older guys would do fentanyl because it would go out of your system quickly. So when they would they knew if they were drug tested on a Monday, they weren't going to be tested again until probably Friday. So they knew it would go out of their system by then and they wouldn't get caught. So, I asked the doctor, did you test him for fentanyl? And the doctor said, we did. And it turned out negative.
We're going to take a short break because this
Okay.
gets right to the crux of the matter here. And I want to make sure we have enough time. When we take this break, I want you all to think about what it'd be like to watch your son or daughter going through this kind of stress. When we come back, you'll hear the rest of the story from Juli. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Malware and bots and worms, oh my. The wild, wild web can be a scary and complex place. And as our digital world expands, so too are the threats. Watch out! Trojan horse. That's why at MediaCom, we take security very seriously and monitor our networks around the clock to stop threats before they can affect you. Not today, rude kid. Not all internet is created equal. We build ours to keep you connected and protected.
Watching MC22 is now easier than ever before. All MediaCom customers can watch local programming online anytime. Go to mc22.net, click Watch MC22, and log in with your MediaCom account. Not a MediaCom cable subscriber? MediaCom internet or phone subscribers can watch too. Your local programming leader, MC22, online at mc22.net/watch.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Or maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all. If I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Juli, who found out that things are not routine when it comes to what happens in an emergency room, and things happen that even doctors are not aware of. Let's hear the rest of her story. Juli?
Okay, so I asked the doctor, did you test him for fentanyl? And the doctor said, yes, our opioid test covers fentanyl. So I said, okay, then what do you think happened? He says, you can take too much Imodium and overdose. So I said, okay, I took Tyler, we left, we went back to the sober living he was living in, and they kicked him out because they said he either took too much Imodium on purpose to get high, or he's stupid and took too much Imodium by accident. But we're in a residential neighborhood. We cannot have ambulances coming at 2 o'clock in the morning and having people overdose. So we said, okay. And they said, but we found him a place at another sober living right around the corner from your house. So I said, okay, great. Tyler was very excited that he would be so close to home. We came to our house and he got to see the dog and he walked the dog and he was on the front porch. He saw my husband and he saw his brother. And we left him on the front porch because my husband had clients that were here from England. So we were meeting them for dinner and we left him on the front porch because he was talking to the new sober living, and the way sober livings work is they have to do intake. He was on the phone with the intake person and he gave us a thumbs up, we told him, I love you. And, we'll talk to you later. And we left and went to dinner. And he texted us a couple times saying, you know, they're not here. They're supposed to pick me up. They haven't come yet. Can I go with my friend Blake to Taco Bell? We said, yeah, sure. Goes with Blake. I'm going to speed it up because it's a whole long story. But you know, Blake is not a drug user. We can totally trust him. Blake drops him off at the sober living. All's well. I text him, remind him to take some antibiotic he was given at the emergency room. You know, I love you. Next morning, I'm doing everything I couldn't do the day before because I had spent the day in the emergency room with Tyler. And I get a phone call from my husband, you know, a little frantic, but saying, did the police call you? And I said, what place? What are you talking about? He said, where Tyler is. He fell and hit his head and the paramedics are there. So I, you know, run to pick up my husband and we go to the place, run in. And I'm thinking that he's maybe unconscious or maybe he needs stitches or something because I see the paramedics car outside and I see a police car. And it's really not making sense. I run in and I said, oh, is he conscious? And the paramedic looks at me and goes, sorry, he didn't make it. And Peter, it was like they were speaking a foreign language to me. Looking back, it should have been on my radar, but it was never on my radar that he would ever overdose and die from something because he was so smart. He knew all the drugs and knew the combinations and knew, you know, what was in everything, I thought. So it still wasn't making sense. I'm like, what do you mean he didn't make it? Like, you know, I want to see him. I want to see him. He was in the bathroom there and there was a policeman standing at the door and he says, you can't see him. And you don't want to see him like this. I'm like what? He says, there's blood. And then I'm like, what happened? Like, why is there blood? Blood when you overdose? I'm very confused. And then it turned out that he had smoked the fentanyl. And when you die from fentanyl, usually if you're like in a kneeling position, you'll fall forward. So a lot of people look like they're praying when they're found. So he fell and hit his head. And at the time, I was terrified because I thought he died from bleeding out. And I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, was he waiting for someone to come and help him? But it turned out that the coroner said, no, he died first. So that made me feel a teeny bit better. So after he passed away, my daughter and I were going through his phone. And we found out the drug dealer and that the girl that had originally introduced him to smoking heroin introduced him to the drug dealer where he got the fentanyl. And then I started thinking, well, this doesn't make sense. And I started talking to people. And one of the guys at the sober living says, you know, it's a separate test they have to do for fentanyl. I'm like, are you sure? So I called the hospital, the emergency room, talked to the head and they said, no, our test covers it. I'm like, are you sure? Then I called their lab and talked to the lab people. And I don't think they were actually supposed to give me this information, but of course Tyler had just passed away. I started crying on the phone. I think they felt bad for me. And I talked to the head of the lab and he says, no, they have to order a separate test. So I'm like, oh my goodness. And I called back the emergency room to let them know, not that I want to sue or anything like that. I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone. And I start trying to contact, I live in Los Angeles and there's a lot of emergency rooms. And I try to start trying to contact the head of the emergency rooms of all the big hospitals. Well, when you call the hospitals, they don't really give you the, you know, chief of the ERs. They won't give you their email address. Okay, we'll pass a message on. I never heard back from one of them, which was really, really upsetting because here I am just trying to save lives. Like, I don't want this to happen to any other family. It's preventable and everything. So time goes by and I kind of put it on the back burner because the DEA was investigating the drug dealer and we had that trial and all that. And then I happened to be on a Zoom about marijuana with a wonderful woman named Heidi, and we had to introduce ourselves. And so I kind of said what I was working on. I had come up with the idea that I'm going to try to get legislation passed. Now, keep in mind, I'm not in the medical field. I don't know anything about standards of care. I just thought maybe they could add it to the standards of care. But I didn't realize that standards of care is not like a law or a checklist that hospitals have to do.
So basically you found yourself in a situation where even the doctors and everybody thought that when they did a tox screen that it tested for fentanyl, which we now know is the deadliest drug out there. And you're finding out that there's no such thing. I mean, the standard tox screen does not test for fentanyl. It would take a separate test.
Correct.
So
and
like,
the doctors don't know, and nobody knew. It wasn't like the doctor was malicious and didn't do it. They were just not informed. Even the head of the ER did not know until I brought it to their attention.
Well, let's take a short break and come back and really get into this because this is profound. We'll see you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Dad, I'm not glitching.
I told you with our new Extreme Internet, it will be smooth streaming.
That's unbelievable.
Well, you better believe it, Missy.
I already finished streaming the whole second season of my show.
So start the third.
What the fast? That's really not frustrating.
I'll take that as a compliment.
You should.
I'm gonna get some ice cream. Do you want some?
With the drama-free reliability of Extreme Internet, you'll have to create your own. Get super fast internet with whole home Wi-Fi for as low as $24.99 a month for a year.
You told me not to talk to strangers. You told me not to cross the street without looking both ways.
You told me not to touch the stove. You told me not to do drugs. You told me not to drink and drive.
You gave me so many messages about how to stay safe. Why didn't you keep me safe by properly storing your gun?
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with Julie about the founding of the Drug Awareness Foundation, Tyler's Law, and the hope she has for parents and teens as we become a better informed public about the risks of fentanyl. Julie, please continue your story.
Okay, so I was on a Zoom and I was telling about a law I want to get passed, and one of the people on there said, "Oh, you need to meet this doctor in San Diego named Ronit Lev, and she's working on something similar. She's an emergency room doctor and addiction specialist." So I emailed her and we started talking back and forth, and she says, "I already have, the bill written. I already had somebody basically write the words. I just need someone to get someone to sponsor it." I'm like, "I'm your girl." Like, if you ask any of my kids, I have 2 other kids, I'm good at nagging. I'm good at nudging people. So I sent letters, like actual physical letters and emails to every legislator that I could think of in California, and didn't hear back from any of them. Finally heard back from a wonderful woman named Melissa Melendez. She's a senator, her aide, and said, "We're interested in the bill." So I started working with them and we got it going. The difficult part a little bit was she's Republican, and if you know anything about California, it's mostly a Democrat state. So there's a lot of politics. People don't want to necessarily put a bill through that's, sponsored by a Republican, but we got co-sponsors on there and it went through the legislature, and Ronit and I both had to testify twice for the Assembly and the Senate part. And it got put through with no, it was 100% yes from everyone and no objections from any. We had a little objection from an organization concerned about their underperforming hospitals. How would they afford it? But Dr. Lev, very graciously offered her services to explain to any hospital that didn't know how to implement the test. And the test is 70 cents a test. So really, how can you complain about the cost of that when you're going to save lives? So then we had the hurdle, was the governor going to sign it? Because again, it was sponsored by a Republican, but he did. He signed it in August of 2022, and then it went into effect the following January of 2023. And a little bit later, I got a phone call from a woman in Maryland who had lost her fiance to fentanyl. And she was concerned, if emergency rooms aren't testing, how was all the data that they put out about fentanyl accurate? And I didn't even think of that, point of view. So I helped her a lot with the law in Maryland, which was based on Tyler's Law. It's called Josh Siemens Act, I think. And so she got it passed in Maryland. I testified in Maryland. And then NBC Nightline, or not Nightline, it's Lester Holt, NBC Lester Holt show. They did a story on us. So after the story, I got numerous messages on Facebook from parents across the country telling me something similar happened to their kids. So one of them was, my son was so messed up a couple of times. I took him to the emergency room and he just turned out positive for marijuana. but it didn't make sense because he was so out of it. She said, later I found out he passed away from taking a fentanyl poison pill, that he was had, you know, small amounts of fentanyl in his system all the time. And had she known, she would have gotten him into treatment. Another one, the child was airlifted to a hospital, and when he was in a coma, and when they put you on a respirator, they give you hospital grade fentanyl in the hospital, but they hadn't tested him before for fentanyl. So they never could definitively say that he died from fentanyl poisoning because the fentanyl from the hospital was in his system. So there was cases like that, you know, other cases of other kids that had been in the hospital and hadn't been tested, had their parents know, they would have gotten them into treatment. So then I got contacted from someone from Pennsylvania that wanted to, it was just an aide for a senator or assembly member, I don't remember. And he just, somehow he was researching something and came across Tyler's Law, and he wanted to implement it there. And I have a friend, another mom who's in my grief group, and the same thing happened to her son in Florida. So she's trying to get it passed in Florida. So then I thought to myself, Ronit and I discussed it, like this should be happening all over the country. Obviously, fentanyl is a huge issue everywhere. This is a kind of death that can be prevented if we know that our kids have it in their system, or even if someone's using drugs, if they buy a bunch of pills and they overdose, and they're fortunate enough to be revived, they can go back and tell all their friends, don't use those pills have fentanyl, or don't use that heroin has fentanyl. So there's a lot of different ways it can help people from knowing.
Well, we've got a lot on the table here, and I know you're now looking to have a federal law created, yes, and you're pushing that. We're going to take a short break, and you're going to share some final comments, insights, and inspiration. Let people know how they can help get this powerful legislation moving forward so we can help save our kids. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back. Dad! You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about Tyler's Law and Julie's effort to fix a broken system to better prepare us to face the threat of deadly fentanyl. Let's see what insights, inspiration, and final comments our guest Julie has to share. Julie, it's your time. Let's hear you.
Okay, so after the law was passed in California, we knew that it should be passed in every state, and it would take a really long time for every state to do it individually. So we decided we're going to try to get it passed federally. So I sent, emails to everyone, and a wonderful representative from California, Representative Liu, decided to take it on. And he is a Democrat, and he got Representative Lada, who is on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and they're the ones that decide to also co-sponsor with him. And now other people have come on, and we have Tyler's Law in the House and the Senate. And so it is bipartisan, and we're still just trying to get more members of Energy and Commerce and in the Senate Help Committee to come on as co-sponsors, or at least be behind the law. So when they come to vote, they know what it is. And so I've been furiously emailing, putting the word out to all my friends. If anyone lives in these districts, that they can send an email to their representatives for me, and have them contact me to have a quick phone meeting, or I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., so I'm going to meet with some people in person and just explain to them how important this is, and the fact that it doesn't cost any money. So the real quick, the Tyler's Law that's going to be federal is a little bit different than the state law, because of the 10th Amendment. You cannot mandate states, the federal government can't mandate that states do something. So this says that Health and Human Services should do a study of how many hospitals are testing for fentanyl. And then once they compile all their data, they will give like a proclamation to all the hospitals that you should be doing this.
And now I took a look at the law, and I suppose that on your website there's a link to it.
No, but I will have it on today.
Okay, well, no, the reason I
Yeah, I
mention it is
should.
because most of the time when you click on a law, it's hard to understand. But this is simple. Anybody could click on it, read it, and go, wow, this is something I understand as a parent, a caregiver, or just as a citizen. I get what this law is saying, and it makes sense.
Yes, and if nothing else, even when Health and Human Services talks to hospitals, that will inform them. And hopefully they will spread the word to all their doctors that you need to order a separate fentanyl test.
Well, and parents or caregivers, if you're in an emergency room with a child, knowing that that's not a standard test, can you ask them to do that when they're there?
Yes, you can, and you should.
Okay.
Because,
That's-
as parents, I believed the doctors. It wouldn't be in my scope to argue with them or to look it up myself. You just believe doctors. And, I'm sure there's parents all over the country in the same situation. And so the more people that know, the more lives can be saved from doing a simple test that costs 70 cents.
And doctors are busy people. I could see how they even would presume that an opioid test would test for fentanyl.
Yeah,
but
they're not experts in, opioids. Emergency room doctors. I mean, Ronit Lev happens to be an addiction specialist, so she's very informed. But the average emergency room doctor, knows a little bit about everything, right? They're not specialists in fentanyl. So this will.
Do you have a final statement you want to leave our viewers with?
I do. If you want to help, I would love your help. I need people to contact their legislatures. You can go on my website and get in touch with me, and I will explain to you what to do and how to do it. And I welcome any help, because the more people that get on board, the higher chance it has of being passed.
I thank you so much for being here today. And I really honor the bravery you have creating this legacy in honor of your son. Our hearts are with you, and thank you. And
I forgot to say that it's drugawarenessfoundation.org. That's the organization that I started with my family, a nonprofit.
Drugawarenessfoundation.org. Fantastic. Yes. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Check out our website at healthyiowa.org and keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader.